Hello and good evening. My name is Rebecca Kiesling, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I felt our monthly meeting was the perfect opportunity to introduce myself. I am NAMI Northern Virginia's new executive director. I'm starting out my third week, and I'm humbled and honored to have been chosen to lead this organization. You're going to start seeing my name on a lot of things as we start to focus on growth of our critical support services, our education, our classes, growth into new communities, and growth into new demographics. So I wanted everyone to be able to put a name and a face together and know that you can contact me at any time with questions or comments and your ideas. It's an exciting time to be part of NAMI Northern Virginia. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and the theme NAMI has chosen this year is Together for Mental Health. We view together as being together with our community, together with our volunteers, together with our businesses, together with everyone that needs support. Now I'm going to steal a line from High School Musical because I have teenagers. We're all in this together. Over the next week, we are excited to start sending out information about the events that NAMI Northern Virginia is holding for Mental Health Awareness Month, but also the events that other organizations and our partners are holding. Keep a lookout in your email and on our social media, and please share with your own network and join us. Also, if you belong to an organization or a business that is looking for ideas on how to be a part of Mental Health Awareness Month, please get in contact with us. We're here to help. And with that, I have spoken long enough, and I'm going to turn it over to Megan Souza now. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our April monthly meeting. We're very excited to have Dr. Erin Berman with us today. Erin is a clinical psychologist at the National Institute of Mental Health. And I'm actually going to let her do most of the introduction. She's going to share a presentation, just a couple logistics. We are on YouTube Live, which means this presentation will be recorded. So if you know someone who couldn't make it live today, who wants to watch later, it'll be on our YouTube page. If you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the live chat to the right of the video. That's where we'll be collecting questions at the end for the Q&A. So feel free to put those in during the presentation. We'll have some time at the end for those as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Erin to get started.
Hello, and thank you all for having me. I feel very lucky to be able to have the time, especially at 7 o'clock at night, all of your time to present to you all. I'm going to start my slide share, so give me 1 second and I will continue to talk after I get it going. So let's do this. Okay, hopefully you guys can see and hear me well. I am, again, Dr. Erin Berman. I work at the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland, which is not too far from you all. And it's better now with less traffic, I guess, due to all the issues of remote, more telehealth, more flexibility at the job. So again, I am a clinical psychologist. I work here primarily with children and adolescents within the context of a research protocol, but mostly my job is to provide care and to provide services to the children that I work with. So I want to start off right off the bat with explaining that, anxiety is different in every person and every child. So again, my focus at the NIMH is children and adolescents, but I also have experiences with adults and older adults even. And it's something that's very important specifically now because we know of a general rise in anxiety and depressive symptoms and suicidality in our youth population. So we always want to be aware and knowledgeable, and hopefully some of the information that I'll be able to provide to you will provide some new knowledge, or at least reinforce the knowledge that you already have. So again, it looks different in a teen, it looks different in a little one. And what's most important is that we respect all the different types of individuals and how their anxiety expresses itself. So I am going to start with, because I come from a scientific community, with a little bit of the more sciencey end, but really this is for parents or even for individuals themselves, I mean, kids and adolescents themselves, to understand why they're struggling in certain ways, or why things may be different from a 5-year-old expressing anxiety to a 20-year-old expressing anxiety. So the front of our brain is what controls our impulses, our ability to say something or not say something, right? And when you think about a baby, or you think about a 3 or 4-year-old, sometimes they say the wildest things, right? There was that show, like something show about like kids say the craziest things. And it's part of it is just the brain development, right? And we know in general what more typical development looks like, and the front is the last place to develop. So imagine that we have all the emotions, we have all the be able to see, the ability to hear, we can get all this sensory information at the youngest age, right? If we don't have kind of any issues with those senses. And what happens is we can't control though how we express those things, right? So it's why we see little ones throwing more tantrums than hopefully the 20-year-olds. And just knowing and having the knowledge as a caregiver, as a teacher, as a support staff, that planning, prioritizing, controlling impulses, and rational behavior, those are the last things that we're going to develop, right? And we can all imagine, and we all can relate what it's like to be very sad or very anxious at moments, right? And how when we feel overwhelmed with emotions, it's very difficult sometimes for even us as adults to control ourselves, right? So if we see the 5-year-old brain, we can look at this image, and it shows you the parts that are less fully mature. So you can see that frontal lobe, how, and what's interesting, you can see the back, right? How the vision is pretty mature. That makes sense. Our vision, which is the back of our brain, is actually where it's processed, is more mature. So you can see the back, and you look at that across the back of the brains. And what we notice too is, again, slowly how it develops. The preteen brain, but think about that. That's still like a good chunk of we see some kids at 10, 11, 12, they still look like pretty old, like that they can handle certain situations, that they won't be able to impulsively scream or yell or manage their emotions. We expect a lot from children and adolescents is kind of the image that I want to put here. And then imagine any other extra firing or emotion that goes on in the base of the brain. The teen brain, we can say it's still not fully formed, right? It's still going. You can see the blue and the purple is where they're really more fully matured. And even at age 20, right, those connections are still maturing, right? We know for females, it's closer to 22 and males 25, more or less. So judgment is our last to develop. That executive functioning, that executive assistant in our brain that tells us to take in this information, but do this, is the last there. And we have to understand that the emotions are there from the get-go. That's very helpful. Obviously, we need to have emotions, but it's very challenging. And what I'm going to talk about is strategies that can be helpful to cultivate more of the front of the brain, right? We may know what to do in a situation, and some of these things are going to be very simple, but really reinforcing them over and over again for a child or adolescent, or even yourself. As we know, when we're all in a stressful situation, this part doesn't function so well. So I think it's always obviously very important to discuss what did happen, and where that can also, that's something that we have to understand the context of development, brain development, social development. It's interesting. I like talking to all different professionals. They give me so many different information of how, what has been impacted from this pandemic. And I was talking to an occupational therapist, and it was really interesting. She was mentioning how, you think about it, a lot of kindergartners, because they were online for a few years, or kindergarten plus first grade, didn't have 200 days of zipping and unzipping a backpack. How she's seen that kind of as a, byproduct of not having that practice, right? Not going out into the world. And that isn't for us to get discouraged, but all these things are for us to know what we have to cultivate more for our children and adolescents, and specifically individuals that are suffering from anxiety and depression. So insert physical distancing. That's tough on everyone, specifically the young kids, right? And the teens, insert lack of normal outlets for kids. And now these are just coming back. But having a year without a party, or having almost 2 years without your sports or your music or your theater that you use to express yourself, is going to have a significant impact on how we cope and what our emotions are looking like currently. insert working from home, right? So all of us as parents or caregivers had to be very flexible and had a lot of different stressors pulled. And that's more than just like the basic, that normal development that is hard anyway. Insert salary loss for many individuals and the differential impact on minority communities. So when an individual is coming to me and expressing their symptoms or their feelings, it's very important that we understand all these things and not just look at just symptoms, but what are all the things around them, right? And I think COVID has amplified us all and made us all having to be much more aware of, it's not just a simple fix for each individual, you know, it's not just one form of treatment. What are all the things we have to address to help this individual grow and manage their symptoms? This is pretty much just to validate all of you and what we're seeing, that estimates from a meta-analysis in the first year of COVID-19 pandemic was that 1 in 4 youth had experienced depressive symptoms, and 1 in 5 youth are experiencing clinically elevated levels of anxiety. A meta-analysis is just when they take a bunch of different studies and try and summarize what they're seeing. I didn't think we needed to go into detail of every single study. This is more supposed to be practical and have information of what you can do to manage anxiety and depression. But it is, and it's currently a really strong issue that resulted from, you know, many factors that were along with our social isolation and dealing with just COVID in general. We also saw the uptick for adults. So again, us as caregivers, very important for us to understand and be compassionate with ourselves. During late June, about 40% of US adults reported struggling with mental health or substance use. As we can see, primary one would be anxiety and depressive symptoms. That was related by the CDC. Obviously, trauma or stress-related disorder symptoms, 26%, whether it was job loss, financial loss, loss of a loved one, and that's all that can fit into trauma and stressor. Started or increase in substance use, very common kind of adjunct to what happened with social isolation and the stress, and then seriously considering suicide, 11%. So on top of us supporting youth and teens, it also impacted the mental health of everyone. So this is just, was really, this slide was born out of, what do we do, a year ago when we're not sure of what's going to happen next. But in general, that's the way the world works. And specifically, anxiety loves to live in uncertainty and breed strong emotions when it talks about uncertainty. So what can we do to help you or help your children manage their anxiety? And I do it in a big macro level, these skills, because again, I think everyone is individual in how they feel and think and what relates to them, but this is kind of the big theme that we always want to impart. So focus on what you can control, right? It's very, very normal, right, to want to control a situation that's uncontrollable. It's kind of almost innate in adults to some extent, right? Like we want to be able to figure things out to help the person next to us. These are all great, great skills and great desires. However, there's a lot, whether it's the COVID pandemic, whether it's something else that we're worried about getting a different illness, worried about a car accident, worried about cancer, that we have to figure out what we can control in these situations. It is natural to have some level of fear and anxiety, right? So you'll see me normalizing this to some extent, specifically now that we're seeing such an uptick. It is now, we'll talk about when it becomes a level that's too high and when we should look for extra help, but it's very normal, specifically when we're in tough times. So focus on what we can control and focus on other aspects of our lives. And that's what made the pandemic even more have a strong impact, is we couldn't do our, hanging out with friends, even in the backyard, big groups, or going to our music class that we enjoyed, or going to school and just playing in a playground. So the things that we wanted our kids to focus on was hard to even cultivate. Now, we can do that a little bit more readily for most families, but focusing on what other aspects of our life besides just this worry and fear. As always, turn off news and social media at times, because again, some level of social media and technology is what allowed us to stay connected at least in my end of the house, was we could Zoom with a few friends. Eventually that got tiring to me, honestly. But you could still have your kid connect with someone that they would not be able to connect with. So we don't want to completely ever swear off social media or turn off the news. That leaves you more in a vacuum and somewhere that's not, maybe so helpful, and practicing acceptance, right? Which is very, very hard for all us fixers in the world that want to just go in and fix it right away. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to like something. Acceptance means we look at what's really in front of us. Okay, social distancing is in effect. It's important for our family to stay safe. We have grandma living in the house, XYZ. Then let's figure out what we can do. And it's, just letting everyone know it's okay where they're coming from. But actually, you can solve problems even better when you really look at a situation for what it is and not what you wish it would be. And well, we all wish some hard situations were better at times. So what do we do? And what's interesting, and you're all aware of, I'm sure very, very aware of, is the way we react to things, whether we're a teacher, caregiver, psychologist, it doesn't matter. The way we react to information, the way we react to something that's occurring, the kid will see that and many times read it. Who knows how they're going to take it? We can't control that. But modeling our behavior in difficult situations is very important. And at the end, we'll talk about how you care about yourself as a caregiver or healthcare provider, because we need to be on. We can't always be on. I'm not looking for perfection, but how do we model our behavior in problem solving? And what I simply mean by that is you can do that by just self-disclosing in a day. If you have an anxious kid or a teen that's sad, sometimes you can self-dialogue about what's going on. I do it all the time. Oh, mommy forgot XYZ. Instead of running around screaming, even though that's exactly what I want to do, I'll be like, mommy, I am feeling stressed out about it. Normalizing the stress. And then what am I going to do about it, right? Normalizing that we're having these feelings. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel stressed. But then what can we do, right? So modeling that as an individual in any aspect of a child's life is very, very helpful. Really understanding how strong social connections, I think, again, these last 2 years has shown that we do need it in whatever version that the individual needs, though, right? So I spent a lot of time working with individuals with social anxiety. And that's a very interesting diagnosis because in its way, it's someone who's nervous about being in a social situation, but we don't ever want to put our values on them. So what I mean is maybe I have one individual who really just wants two good friends and to be able to walk to the park every day. They don't have to be involved in group sports, or they don't have to be involved in theater, or maybe they just want to do math club. That's fine. But figuring out what for your child or adolescence is a social thing that they really want to be a part of. Because social belonging is very important to mood and anxiety. Positive peer support transfer, which I love. It's like having that peer, that friend, that individual in the classroom model and support the other children, right? One, it's not too excessive, obviously, but really realizing that we're not the ones that have all the answers. I am definitely not the one who has all the answers, even though I've been doing this for quite some time. But understanding, helping kids figure out who to go to besides just ourselves as caregivers or just the teacher. And boundaries modeling. Many times hard for individuals in the healthcare industry, but letting kids know when should we turn on and when we should turn off. And that's right here, right in front of our brain, right? When do we stop something? When do we stop? Oh, we really would love to be there. We'd love to help this person out, but when is it that we need to take care of ourselves? So when does anxiety, now we'll get to more the nitty gritty of anxiety, but that was kind of the macro level of how I approach, just in general skills that we can kind of model to children and adolescents with this. But when does it become problematic, right? Because we all have levels of anxiety. Well, if we don't, that's problematic. If someone has no anxiety, that's something different to manage. But avoidance versus approach. And again, avoiding situations that are important to that individual or their daily needs, right? Where they have to go to school, or if it's a 20-something, they have to go to work, right? To support themselves. Avoiding things that are important for them. They want to go to soccer, but they can't. They want to go be part of that math club, but they can't. So looking at a pattern of staying away from things that are important to them or things they have to do. Interference. This is usually when I hear from the caregivers, right? It's interfering in my child's ability to go to school. It's interfering in my child's ability to be happy. It's interfering in my child's ability to make new friends, right? Or to study or to focus, right? There's so many things. And that's why I was saying anxiety has such a broad impact, and it looks different in every child or individual in general. So when is it really interfering in their life? Many times what we're going to see is more distress expressed at home than at school, specifically with an anxious kid, right? And they're a lot of times going to be the ones that hold it together at school, hold it together in aftercare, hold it together even at soccer, but they come home and they just unleash because it's been a whole day of them trying to keep very strong emotions in. And parents will say, gosh, I see it. They're upset. They're crying. They're screaming. They're feeling very upset when they come home. And obviously transient versus persistent is very, very important. We all have times in our life where we avoid or our behavior interferes in us getting something done or we're distressed, right? So, it's really, is this something that's happening more from over a few months, right? Is this something happening over a few weeks and not connected to a trauma? Then we would look at it and approach it in a little different way. It still would be anxiety, but a different way than an anxiety disorder. It'd fall more in trauma related instances. And as we know from those slides now above 1 in 4, 1 in 5, lifetime prevalence seems to be about a quarter, meaning you're not going to have, not a quarter of the population is always experiencing anxiety disorder, but at one point in their life, they will make criteria for that. So what do we want to look for? Probably all of you are well versed in this, but I think it's important to review because it's something that anxiety is so common. So how would we know if a kid is having excessive anxiety? Something where it can be problematic. You hear them, they're very vocal, and maybe they worry before and after certain events. They talk a lot, and not just about random things, but you start to hear the theme about concerns about going to school, concerns about being, in a certain classroom. And again, it could simply be that there is someone in the classroom that is causing them stress or anxiety, but that's still worry and it's still interfering, right? Irritability is a very common one that kind of gets swept under the rug sometimes. People are cranky, short, little things that normally wouldn't set them off is setting them off. And that could be a symptom of anxiety or depression. Problem sleeping is one of the number one ones that you'll see. And when it's problem sleeping, it's important to note that could be falling asleep and then they could be fine for the night. It could be they wake up in the middle of the night. They fall asleep fine, but they wake up very stressed out. Or they wake up early, right? So any symptoms of problematic sleeping is something to address. Specifically, the first line of defense would always be maybe the pediatrician, and just have them, if you're not sure if it's normal, contacting them or contacting a community provider that would have access to someone you could consult with would be helpful. Problems being alone. We don't mean like they have to be alone by themselves in the house for hours, but in situations that is required by that household, right? So mom needs to be able to cook on this floor, but, child needs to be able to stay in the other room. That's one that might be problematic, right? And the child can't stay in the other room when the mom really needs this to happen. Or obviously having problems sleeping alone if it's problematic for that family, problems going to different levels of the house alone, or obviously going to school. That's a lot of times where we will see that type of anxiety. Doesn't like being the center of attention in situations that are necessary, meaning just saying hi to someone or having to give a presentation in class. They don't have to be Broadway performers, but understanding that where it's problematic, that could be a symptom of it. Avoids raising their hand in class or talking to the teacher, or even if they don't want to raise their hands, won't ask the teacher privately afterwards, right? Seeing where it's starting to interfere in school and schoolwork. Panic, which is what we'll talk about, very common with most individuals will have some level of panic at some point in their life, but seeing it more often. Freezing. So when we talk about anxiety, it can be fight, flight, or freeze, right? So fight is obviously self-explanatory. Irritability, aggression, right? Flight is running, so our avoidance, and freezing is just like you say, oh, hi, and the kid just It's not because they don't want to many times. It can be because just that strong emotional reaction just kicks in, and it takes lots of practice to overcome. They talk about butterflies. They talk about their stomach hurting, heart racing. We just talked about fight or flight response. Problems concentrating can be linked to an attentional issue like ADHD, or it could be part of anxiety or a bit of both, and so many more. So what are the physical symptoms to look for anxiety? And again, this is just a few, right? I could go on forever. We could talk about just this, the panic response, the anatomy of fear. We could just spend a whole lecture on that. Stomachache, headaches, you hear that, nausea, dizziness, frequent trips to the bathroom. And again, it can be all of these or any of these or one of them, right? Tightness and pain in chest, sweating, dizziness, heart racing, feeling derealization, like out of your body, depersonalization, not understanding what's kind of going on. And these are very important to figure out, how do we address these physical symptoms when they kick in for a kid? Because a lot of caregivers or professionals who are not as well versed in anxiety specifically will want to shut it down quickly. Well, guess what? When the brain turns on, of course I'm pointing at my screen, it's hard to slow it down. So what do we do? How do we help someone cope with intense physical symptoms? Remember, you can't stop it. So once that brain kicks in, once that emotional reaction kicks in, don't say, stop, it's okay, calm down. Because it's very hard at that point for their body and their mind to calm down. But know in your mind you can help them cope. You can, okay? So our goal is not to stop it. Our goal is start to slowly de-escalate it for them, right? And this is for yourself. You can do it for yourself too if you ever have panic. So listen, don't talk a lot. When your base emotions are kicking in, whether it's anger or fear or anxiety, that individual's not listening to you. They're not listening at all. Don't talk a lot. I mean, I talk a lot. So I'm just saying, like, jumping in, saying things goes right out one side and out the other side of the brain. Be a calming influence if you can. All right. Be relaxed. Try and breathe. You try and get control, even if the situation looks terribly uncontrollable. If you can't, and you have other options, go get them. Go get uncle down the hall, go get grandma, call somebody. If you have other options, you can always, even if you are freaking out, you both can know this ends. We can't stay up here forever. One thing I've found out, anxiety cannot stay at a 10 forever. And then you don't just blow up and explode. Eventually it goes down. Now, maybe again, for some individuals, their anxiety will only go down to an 8, but we do know on a curve that it will go down. And it will end this level of intensity. And grounding is, obviously, you can Google this. They have great things online. It's really focusing on a sense or multiple senses. That's the one real important thing that you can do in the moment when the physical symptoms or the upset is really strong. And that can be turn on some music if you have that available. Get something cold or warm. So an ice cube, grab something from the freezer. Make sure it's not dinner. I'm kidding. Hold it in your hands. That the cold one has been a really good one for a lot of my clients when they're in the middle of panic. Can you get a big cup of water, right? Ice water, something warm, smell some tea. So tapping into those senses, right? There's so many ways to do it. One that kids really seem to grab hold on is, let's say they go into a classroom and they're feeling overwhelmed and they're by themselves. I want you to find one thing of each color of the rainbow. Okay, that picture has a red. Okay, that person has an orange shirt. Okay, that's yellow. My pencil is yellow. And just starting to bring yourself out of your mind and into what's in front of you, because that's the idea. If your life is in danger, if something is seriously happening, I'm not trying to ground people. We're just trying to preserve ourselves. But what can we do in a classroom setting, in a home setting, that will help de-escalate panic? So we want to walk with our anxiety. We don't want to fight it, and I'm sure if anyone else has heard me talk, one of the favorite experiments that I give or have all of my patients do is, okay, you can do this now or not if you feel comfortable. Right now, I want you to close your eyes and do your best to not imagine a white bear. Do not think of a white bear. Don't picture that white bear. Make sure there's not a white bear in your mind. And the more you try not to have something occur, the more it pops in your brain, right? So normalize the level of stress that we're experiencing, what the anxiety is, and then we're going to learn to cope with it versus fight. And a very incredible, many incredible patients have reminded me how much we all want anxiety to not exist, especially when it's really intense. And it's very important that we all translate this to someone we know. If they have excessive anxiety, we can't get rid of it altogether. And the more, we don't want to be anxiety free. I know that sounds horrible when we're experiencing a 10 anxiety, but anxiety gets us up on time. Anxiety makes us not forget our keys or lock ourselves out of our place. So it is important. We want to cope with it versus fight against it and trying to stop it. Because the more we stop it, the more we say we don't want it, the stronger and stronger it tends to get. We also, I like to use this as an example to sometimes help kids and adolescents understand how we can manage it better. And also how to take the onus off of us, right? Anxiety is something innate. People with excessive anxiety, it's not their fault, right? So it's a brain glitch. It's just like when we were on Zoom for the last couple of years and still are, where you can't hear me or things go silent. There's many reasons our brain glitches, right? That's not because we don't have the skills or we're not good enough or we can't manage it well enough. What is our bandwidth, right? So how much information can we take in, right? That's super important. Like I have a lot of individuals, once I finally give that analogy that look at, if you have all these thoughts and all these worries, it's really hard to cope and it's not your fault. We got to figure out how to slow those thoughts and those worries down. Our connection. So have we, connected ourselves enough with the day? Have we eaten enough? Have we drank enough? Are we able to even have that strong connection so our brain can even function, right? There's many reasons why it might be a bigger glitch. So we have general innate worry and we haven't taken care of our basic needs. It's really hard. Then it's a big glitch that day and it's hard to manage it. And our speed, again, that's connected more to how do we take care of our bodies and our minds so we can be able to approach anxiety more as a smaller big glitch and not something that defines us, right? So as I said, that's why I had that slide, what we want to do. And this was not more challenging, but it was more on the caregiver to enforce these during the time of virtual learning. But every day, we want to have some level of all of this, right? Checking in on our sleep cycle. Are we all going to bed on the right time? Or at least close to when we should be going to bed? Are we all going for a walk or at least walking around our place of work or running up and down our stairs in our house? When I review these things, it's very important to understand that just even 5 minutes of any of these, not sleep, sorry, a day can really help cultivate and build up. A lot of individuals are very all or nothing with this. They hear exercise and they think they have to do X, Y, Z for it to be beneficial. Or this third one, time alone. Oh, you need a day at the spa. No, maybe just that cup of tea in the morning or that walk for a minute on the way back of dropping your kids off from school. Being outside, terribly, terribly wonderful reboot, even if you don't want to do it. And I have to say, after like a few hours and like Sunday morning, I tell my kids it's time to go outside. Wow, I never hear so much complaining. No. And then once you're out there, usually, not all the time, 99% of the time, it does help. It does bring back some level of peace and ability to cope. Eating, what do we eat? When we eat? Gosh, during the pandemic, I can't tell you how many of my patients, I would say, did you eat yet? They would roll out of bed, get on Zoom. No, I didn't. Because there was no structure of everyone eating together or, like a lunchtime. So how's eating? And again, you'll see me really push social connections. I do know there's been a number of very well-run studies that does show an increase in social connections, specifically through adolescence, is very protective for significant anxiety and depression. Right? It's not going to solve everything. And again, when I want to always define social connections as whatever that individual wants, right? If they get a huge benefit from doing D&D one night a week, fine. Or they need to be doing soccer 5 nights a week, that works with that individual. So just having that group that you connect with or that love of the same thing that you connect with isn't terribly beneficial. So those are the basics. one thing that's important to remember about anxiety is anxious kids in general do not feel good messing up. None of us really do, right? But as a caregiver or a health professional, I can't see how many times I've had a kid say, tell me it's going to be all right, or tell me there's not going to be any more anxiety. And every part of me wants to say, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. It'll be okay. And these are the 3 things you can do. But that's the beauty about therapy or just being an active listener. We want them to mess up and learn. We want them to have problems and learn, not problems that they can't handle, right? So your child or adolescent has a issue that kids at kindergartner, there's no way they can manage this bully. That's different. But things like turning in your homework or saying something maybe inappropriate to a friend. We've all done that. Well, I can admit that. And then figuring out, how do I problem solve this? How do I reach back out to that person? And what you can do is listen to them more and help them figure out, what are all the solutions when something goes wrong, right? It's okay that they mess up. It's okay they don't turn an assignment in. It's okay they said something inappropriate to somebody. We all do. How do we help them, right? Also, make sure they have a bit of a community. And that community can be one other person. I'm not saying a huge, structure, but help them identify who else they can go to, right? Specifically at school. School is a very strong place for anxiety to live and breed. And letting them know, oh, that one counselor is always there. Or maybe they don't, particularly connect with that counselor in the school, that teacher, that math teacher that they always liked. Go to them. Other parents, other relatives. And for you, medical professionals, having a psychologist, having the pediatrician, or any of your family friends. None of these are ranked in any specific way, but just having people know that there's more people that are invested in them and to help them problem solve when there's issues. Because again, anxiety breeds in uncertainty. And the more skills we have, hopefully our anxiety goes down a little bit. Supporting a new mindset, specifically in the self-critical, super sad, depressed individuals, it's hard when you're in that mix. And you as a caregiver have to start to mess with it and help them. But the anxious kids, the anxious adults are usually pretty self-critical. They're very perfectionistic. And I want us to always understand perfectionism can look any way in a kid. It can look at a kid who's totally failing, or it can look at the one that's working every night till 3 a.m. Again, really reiterating that anxiety looks different in everybody. That are very future oriented. They need to know, they need to be at peace with things. But the people that are going to have a different mindset about it, or at least for you to say, it's okay to make mistakes. Again, very simple, hard to do. So experience is the name everyone gives to their mistakes. I like that. I use that. I feel much better about my multiple mistakes every day. So what do? We want to, again, really be more like a sports coach versus an expert. Yes, I've been doing this work with anxiety for a good amount of time, but I have to say, every day someone teaches me something that I missed, that I didn't think of, different ways to approach things. So we really want to be active listeners and help individuals express their feelings. Be a coach. So think about when I say role play in social situations or trouble situations. What do people do in practice when they have a game, right? And regretfully, every day at school is kind of a game. You got kids, you got teachers to interact with. It's a lot. Us at work, a bit of a game we have to kind of be on. So if there's a situation that a child's nervous about or stressed about, practice it. I have to say, I've had kids usually really benefit. Okay, if there's a teacher they're afraid to talk to, you can make it fun. I mean, as fun as you want, but you as the caregiver can be the child, and maybe the child can be the teacher. And so you can learn to figure out, how do we say it? And let's practice what we're going to say. Because remember, anxiety is fight, flight, or freeze. And we want this to be easy. And in those moments where someone's feeling anxious, they need practice. As we said in the last slide, maybe it's overwhelming and, we can't handle a situation. That's okay. It's not so all or nothing. Know the adults or trusted friends that are good buffers in difficult situations. Really, at school or at a social event, who can I have to rely on if there are difficulties? So what do we want to do with anxiety, just as a macro level, as someone who wants to cultivate a child to cope with it in a little bit more active way. Being sensitive, really active listening. We'll talk a little bit about what we don't want to say in a few minutes. Be educated. That's why you're all here. That's why I continue to listen to my patients. What is it that I need to learn? What do I need to improve on? But listening and make sure that you're educated and you can impart this knowledge to children. Give positive feedback. Anxiety and depression, we know, has a negative bias in that brain. It is not anyone's fault. It's just the way it's wired. So we want, if we can, make sure to be as positive as we can in situations. Be calm. Like I said, even if you're not feeling calm, please fake it. If you can't fake it, try and get someone to help you, manage it. Be consistent. So whatever we want our kids to do, we want to make them know that we're always going to expect that, or that we're always going to be there for, yes, we work late, but we'll always be there by 8 p.m. that night. Or maybe we can't, but you can always call us at this break, right? So being consistent with when we'll be available or when we're checking in, and focus on problem solving skills, right? Not focusing on the disaster that is in front of us, because there will always be a disaster here and there. There will be a fire to put out. But how can we problem solve? We also, again, don't want to rescue too much. The caveat is a situation where an adult needs to be involved, a bully, an issue with a teacher that's hard for a child or an adolescent to navigate. Fine, we want to step in. But accommodating too much, not letting them have their own agency to try and do things on their own. Let a teen avoid too much. So what that typically look like is first one of my patients will say, I don't want to do soccer anymore. And that's fine. I don't want to go to after school club anymore. Okay. And their world starts to get smaller and smaller. That's what I mean by too much. Oh, I can't go to school this morning. Too much. Again, sometimes we need mental health days. Sometimes we need to help intervene. But letting them do things that they kind of should be able to do, we have to watch. Single out the child or ridicule. I don't think anyone would do that on purpose, but sometimes, we might say, why did you do this? What was wrong? When they know already many times what they've done wrong. So let's focus on the other side. Let's not focus on what was wrong. What can we do now moving forward? Because their brain is going to stick on what was bad and what's not going to change. Excessive reassurance, so telling them everything's going to be fine, because it's not. We're going to have hard days. Being too directive, taking over as a parent or caregiver, we really want to do, and criticizing too much. So this is how we want to approach it more. And again, use your own words or approach it in the way that you feel comfortable. But something like this: you're brave, you're resourceful, you're a thinker. One or none of those, but some version of that. You have everything you need inside to cope with things brilliantly. Don't let your mind tell you that you can't do hard things, because you absolutely can. Again, the caveat I would add to this is also making sure they know who is there to support them. And remember, mom's here, uncle's here, teacher here, coach here, So they have it in themselves. They're resourceful, they're brave. And here's your support system. As we're saying, we're providing support, not protection, when someone has an anxiety disorder, right? We don't want to protect them from everything. We don't want to do their work for them. Again, most of you all know this, but even little things that we do to protect. I know I do it for my children on a regular basis, and it's important to watch yourself and see, where am I maybe protecting too much? What can they do? So obviously, you're just going to listen, and you're there. You're there to give hugs. If you're not a touchy person, that's fine. You're there to say, I care, acceptance. So what is it that's happening? Okay, this happened at school. I got it. I'm with you. I have faith in you. Versus, oh my God, this is what happened in school. Again, we're all going to do that once or twice or once a week. But really being able to start to figure out, how do we start to model this, and how do we start to change our behavior? What's going on in your head, right? So just ask instead of try and guess. That's always a real tricky one for a lot of individuals. They think they know. And maybe 90% of the time you're right about your child, but maybe we should just make sure. Again, you guys are going to be tired by problem solving, but let's figure out what we can do. This is a situation. This happened with this friend. What can we do? Have them face their fears. Have them do the things that scare them and make them feel uncomfortable, but do it in little manageable steps, not big ones, right? And try to place limits on social media. Again, limits is where I am, not completely removing it, because it's kind of hard nowadays to function without it. What not to say to someone with anxiety? These are ones that I can definitely say most of my patients will find slightly irritating or turn off to some extent. Quit being dramatic. You're just being lazy. You need to toughen up. Come on, it's easy. Pull yourself together. When are you going to grow up? You're crazy. Can't you just try harder? Those are very common phrases that are given out in this world. So this isn't the function of people not being good or thoughtful individuals. It's just kind of the way we've kind of approached things for a long time, and hopefully that's changing, but there. Try one of these instead, and anyone that would maybe fit for you, or all of them. I know this is hard for you. So again, we're just empathizing. We're listening. Take some time and it's okay. How can I help? That's what I say. Be a helper, but ask them what they need. You don't need to tell them. That's why we're being supportive, but not protective, right? What do you need right now? Want to talk about it? I see more than just your anxiety. This is what I love about you. So really being empathetic and understanding. This alludes to what we were just talking about. We want to manage our overinvolvement as adults. We love to help and fix. That's great. We have great hearts. We're good people. But a lot of times, excessive anxiety and stress interferes with our boundaries, right? Or even many teachers' boundaries or professionals' boundaries, right? How many times do I pick up the phone? How many times do I email this person out back or email this teacher back? So, make sure what you can do and figure out what your kid can do. So to create healthier boundaries and increase independence. That's why, again, little activities they do on their own is just so fantastic. Whether it's soccer, after school club, whatever it might be, really helps them to have their own sense of self. Here we go. This is for all of you. And I'll wrap up in a few minutes. So hopefully if there's any questions or comments, then we can wrap up by 8 o'clock. So ask for help, right? Those first two ones, really. Is there a counselor you can kind of tap their brain? Is there a teacher? Parent Resource Center. We have NAMI. There's great places that you can just go to think and talk and see maybe where there might be services that you're unaware of. Referral sources. Call that psychiatrist, call that psychologist, outside counselor, social worker, pediatrician. If you have questions or overwhelmed, we all need our extra support, specifically in these times. And watch your bandwidth, right? Know that when you're burned out, by the time you've hit burnout, which a lot of individuals have, a few days off is not going to do it. Every day, well, not most of us don't have the ability to every day self-reflect and figure out what we're doing, what thing we can move to the next day or the next week, but we do need to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others. And what are those things? Any and all or none of these, right? Deep breathing. It's free. It's hard for many people to find the time to think to do it, but you can do it. Maybe you can do it when you're driving your car or walking through the grocery store, right? Mindfulness, as we've heard and data suggests, is a very helpful type of way to have a daily practice of calming down and looking at things in a less reactive a way, right? Progressive muscle relaxation. And any of these things you can Google. Luckily the internet does provide lots of good things and lots of resources that are at no cost, right? Yoga for my individuals that cannot do deep breathing but want to try some level of mindfulness meditation. Their body's moving, sometimes they do better. Exercise, sports, any clubs, could be crochet, it could be anything from that to Dungeons and Dragons, as I said. Music could just be turning on the radio or walking around playing a piano. But whatever it is, find something to do for fun and not be good at it. That's really key for my perfectionists. It really allows you to just enjoy something in a day, and that's sometimes hard for my perfectionists. As we said, socialization is wonderful on whatever level you feel comfortable, and support. Checking in with people. Ask people if they can listen to you, making sure you are at least downloading a little bit of the stress that's in your life to someone else besides your own head. So who are we? We, again, are a study that looks at anxious individuals. We can look at kids that are 8 to 17. We are located only in Bethesda. It would be great if we had satellite offices everywhere, but we don't. And just to be aware that we are a resource. That number on there is for people who are interested in our study. However, also, we are just a resource for the area. So if someone's interested in a psychologist in some part of Northern Virginia, and they would want to know what we know or what communities are out there that are helpful at different levels of fees, we're here for that, right? And that is our goal because we are federally funded. And so all the services that we have to offer at the clinical center at NIMH is of no cost to any individual that participates. So that's kind of a very quick overview of all the things that I want someone to know to help cope in really difficult times. Obviously, we could talk though for probably months overall. So are there any questions or comments?
Thank you so much, Erin. This was fantastic. So much great information. I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to feel free to put questions that you have in the chat to the right. I did see one question come in already. The question was, do your recommendations change if a child has both general anxiety disorder and depression?
Great. That's a fantastic question. So they change a little bit depending on how bad is the depression, right? I'll just kind of anecdotally, not knowing the individual. If one of my patients has both, I do usually like to focus, which I'm really glad you bring this up, much more on strategies to lift the depression, because someone who's sad and overwhelmed, it's hard to then get to the anxious stuff. I've never had a lot of good luck, jumping right into the anxiety, unless the anxiety seems, from a professional perspective, or you, if you're a parent, your kid well, connected directly to the anxiety, right? I hope that's not too convoluted, but if the depression seems very connected to that, we can hit the anxiety right away. But if you got depression, we just have to get the basics, right? Just walking around. Behavioral activation is what you'll read. If you look at any of the studies, just getting out, talking just to the parent, more like that. So we would probably want to address it that way than just simply, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And I was thinking earlier how I love that you touched on sort of the sleep exercise, go outside, because I think a lot of people think about that as, what you do with depression, but maybe don't realize that it can be beneficial for anxiety as well, and maybe more associate those with the depression and work on getting out of that than the anxiety. So I appreciated you touching on that. I'm going to see if anyone else has any questions, but I have a couple questions I'd love to ask while I see if any of those questions come in. So I know you talked a little bit about sort of when somebody's in that state of panic, needing to focus on de-escalating, and you talked about a couple strategies. Do you have any other strategies that a loved one or a friend, a parent can help somebody sort of de-escalate from that state of panic? I know you talked about the senses. Do you have a couple other strategies that you'd recommend?
I mean, I think two other ones that are very good. Sometimes you just, as long as the individual is safe, like they're not going to hit something, sometimes just leaving them for a few minutes, and you can pretty much know as the caregiver, like, okay, I know they're just going to be freaking out. Maybe they're screaming in the room, but there's nothing dangerous that they're going to like hurt themselves on, right? I think just giving someone some space, we all want to be there, and just it's such our desire to go in and really just want to take care of that person. And the best thing to do is say, I'll be back in about 30 seconds, or I'll be back in a minute. And that also allows you to calm down, right? So knowing that you can leave the space if someone's freaking, as long as they're safe, is fine. The third thing too that I kind of alluded to is just reminding them that, look, this has happened before. Most likely it has for most of my anxious patients, and it does end, and I'll be here with you. Just giving really lots of very kind of not positive, because none of my patients like puppy dogs and rainbow type of, it'll all be better forever, but just kind of encouraging that you've done this before. I'll be here with you. I'll come back, and then you go get that grounding thing, get that glass of water, and see if you can go back, and kind of, and really encouraging them to stick with it. Like, it'll go down, even though they're not going to feel like that in the moment.
Awesome, thank you. A quiet group today. I don't see too many questions coming in, but I did have another one. Early on, you sort of mentioned that trauma and anxiety can look similar. I was curious if sort of, again, as a loved one, a parent, a friend, are there ways that you can sort of tell the difference if maybe you don't know that there's been a traumatic event, or maybe it's something that's not obvious, or is it important to know the difference, or would you sort of respond the same way no matter what?
In general, in the macro way, you would respond the same way, and it still would be very much the same types of treatment for someone with trauma, versus like just a generalized anxiety where nothing specifically caused this level of stress. However, it is, very important. And honestly, sometimes someone will be in therapy with me for a year before they or the parent even identify, oh, this was the trauma that did, kind of really lead to this that now we need to process. But obviously on the very immediate, if there's any danger that it's going to happen again, is one thing. But sometimes individuals are not ready, and I think pushing someone when they're not ready is also not the most beneficial. So just and also anything that has a quick onset would also always give me a little bit of a red flag that maybe something happened. I have parents will say, nope, this individual was always a little nervous at school, but then when you have the individuals where it's like, oh, this just kicked in at 13, it could be a trauma. It also could be puberty. So again, I don't want to take it as like just black or white, but I think if there's a sudden onset and if it's something, then we want to make sure that they're addressed appropriately and with someone who deals with trauma more than just basic anxiety disorders.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. And give everyone a chance. Last chance to ask a question in the chat for Dr. Berman. Thank you again. Thank you so much for this presentation. So much of this resonated with me, and I live with anxiety, so I connected with so much of it, and it was great to hear, and I hope that our attendees thought the same. Just before I close out, I just want to remind everybody, if you weren't here at the beginning, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We have a lot of things going on that we'll be sharing soon. So if you're not on our email list, I highly recommend getting added to our email list because we have a lot of awesome events coming up in May. Also follow us on social media. I'll put my email in the chat too in case you have any questions or need to get added to our list. But I appreciate you, Dr. Berman, and everyone for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their Monday. Thank you.